Crazy horse, we hear what you say. One earth, one mother. One does not sell the earth the people walk upon. We are the land. How do we sell our mother? How do we sell the stars? How do we sell the air? Crazy horse, we hear what you say. Too many people standing their ground, standing the wrong ground. Predator's face, he possessed a race. Possession, a war that doesn't end. Children of God, feed on children of earth. Days people don't care for people. These days are the hardest. Material fields, material harvest. Decoration on chain that binds. Mirrors gold. The people lose their minds. Crazy horse, we hear what you say. One earth, one mother. One does not sell the earth the people walk upon. We are the land. Today is now and then. Dream smokes touch the clouds. On a day when death didn't die, real world.
Greetings, Aquabob. Welcome. Hello. We hope that you are doing very well today, that you're at your highest level of mental, physical, and spiritual awakening and strength, and that you're doing wonderful today. We thank you for joining us for this week's episode of Our Ancestors' Voices, a weekly program sponsored by the All African People's Revolutionary Party. We are here and back and glad that you could join us for this important topic, how July 4th keeps us enslaved. This past Friday, we had another episode of the so-called American Independence Day, and I mean, these people are just they're just amazing to me. How uh, it's like you have a relative or a friend or someone you know that nothing you say, nothing they say is ever the truth. Everything they say to you is a lie, and when you question them on that, they act like you're the problem for questioning them for lying consistently. We all have known people like that. I mean, that's what this country is to me and to us. It's like these lies they perpetuate, and they perpetuate it so often that most of the time, most of us just cave to it and accept it. And July 4th is another institution they have that's a reflection of that. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. So we're glad that you're here to join us for this topic, very important topic. You know, institutions are how you spread and maintain dominant values in your society. You do that through the institutions that you promote. And we don't understand that. That's why we're so subjected to all of these backward views that go up against everything that we experience on a day-to-day basis. So we'll get into that. But we also want to start, as we always do, by giving thanks and honor to the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere, the true indigenous people. We're not talking about confused Africans out here, because there are many of us that are confused, that are, well, we've been here for thousands of years, and not one of these people has read a single book about African history. So we understand the problem. You know, everybody wants to be affiliated with something with prestige, and because we, as I just mentioned about July 4th and these other institutions these people promote, we are subjected to the constant negative propaganda about our history by our enemies, that we are just subjected to it and we accept it. And so we don't want to have anything to do with Africa, because we see Africa as a failing reality, which nothing could be farther from the truth. But that's how we see it. We don't travel anywhere. We don't own passports. We're not even thinking about getting passports. We're not even thinking about going to Africa. Even those of us Africans in the US who travel, most of the time go to Europe. And that says everything that needs to be said. Right? That says everything that you don't even know a European that goes to Africa before they go to Europe, unless they're going to Africa to spread European values and culture through missionary work or some other kind of nonsense. That's the only reason why they go to Africa, period. Not to mention go to Africa before they go to Europe. But yeah, we will go to Europe multiple times, not even think about going to Africa, not even consider it. And don't consider it because we've been thoroughly propagandized. So this is why we have to talk about this subject. So we give honor and respect to the indigenous people, the real ones, the people who are natives or Indians, as many of them call themselves, or indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere, or Chicanos, or Mexicanos, or Puerto Ricanos. These are the actual indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. And this is their land, from Alaska all the way down to Chile. And they fight every day to regain the dignity of their people and their land. And any conscious African has to support that struggle, because it's the exact same struggle that we're engaged in, whether we know it or not. It's the exact same struggle. And I don't know how the hell we expect other people to support us when we know nothing about their history, nothing about their struggle, but we just expect everybody to. I mean, that is the problem with identity politics. We just expect everybody to support us, and we don't even take 5 minutes to learn about what else is happening in the world and how those struggles connected to ours can help our struggle get stronger. So we give honor and thanks to them, and we also give, of course, honor and thanks to our African ancestors, who are the reason why we exist today on the planet Earth. Our people fought the colonizers every step of the way, from the Indian Ocean in East Africa all the way down to the Cape, up through the Mediterranean waters in the north, through the Atlantic Ocean, all the slave dungeons in Africa, all the colonizers who raided Africa, all over Africa, and imposed their will on us throughout our homeland of Africa, all the way through the Middle Passage. Those of us who were not able to stay in Africa and were kidnapped and forced to leave Africa and brought over to this cesspool empire, all of us, all of our ancestors, that whole experience of colonialism in Africa and slavery have fought and never stopped fighting. And still, many of us continue to fight today. So we give honor to our ancestors because they're the ones who gave us the power, the spirit to want to fight back and stand up for what's right. If you sat and run around here talking about um, uh, we uh, uh, I would never tolerate this stuff that they're willing to do. That's the spirit of your ancestors in you. Well, it's the spirit of your ancestors in you if you actually act on it. If it's not just words. If it's just words, I don't know what that is, but that's not our ancestors. Because if they would have sat around running their mouths as much as many of us do today and doing nothing, we would be extinct by now. Our ancestors were about action. And so we stand in respect to their example and we thank them for the legacy that they have provided to us. And we just give history for those that may not know. Our Ancestors' Voices is sponsored each week by the All African People's Revolutionary Party, AAPRP. And the AAPRP is a revolutionary, independent, mass, pan African political party, which is based in Africa, the national home for African people scattered and suffering all over the planet Earth. Approximately a billion of us living in Africa and another billion or so of us living outside of Africa, not by our choice. It's our national home. And our objective is Pan Africanism, which we define correctly as one unified socialist Africa, one united Africa under one continental socialist government. We don't care what you say. We know that that is the solution to the problem African people face wherever we are on the planet Earth today. We are not going to solve the problem through the microstates in Africa. We are not going to solve the problem for voting for some cracker, a graham cracker in this backward cesspool. The problem will only be solved when we unite and lift up our mother, Africa, because all the wealth in the world, a lot of it, a large percentage of it, exists because it's being stolen from Africa. And we're imitating the thieves instead of taking control of our homeland, which is where they got their wealth. So that's what Pan Africanism is. And our work to achieve Pan Africanism is outlined in Kwame Nkrumah's Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare. If you're looking at a screen, and hopefully you are, you see the cover of it on your screen. And this book is the playbook for the All African People's Revolutionary Party, which is designed to bring unity among all of the revolutionary Pan-Africanist formations on the ground that agree that Pan-Africanism is one unified socialist Africa. And there are many of these wonderful formations, from the African Party for the Independence of Guinea-Bissau, the PAIGC, to the Democratic Party of Guinea, to the Pan-Africanist Congress and the Azanian People's Organization of Azania, or what you call South Africa, and many, 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 many others. Our work is to unite all of our people. We are one. We are one. I myself am a member of the APRP and the PAIGC, even though I live in this backward cesspool, because our people know that we're one and we will never be free until we unite and come together. So our Ancestors' Voices is hosted each week by APRP organizers, myself, Ajamu, and my biological and ideological daughter, the newly uh, arrived Dr. Shakura Umi. So to get us started, I will turn it over to the good doctor to start us off on our topic today, how July 4th keeps us enslaved.
Thank you so much, Baba Jama. Appreciate you. What's up, good people? Hello, hello, hello. We have missed you. We hope that you are well. Thank you so much for joining us and coming back today. We hope that you are surviving, resisting these institutions and these institutional practices, because hopefully at this point, the reason that you are with us today is because you know deep down that those institutions should not be celebrated by you if you practice humanism, if you practice egalitarianism, if you practice collectivism, if you believe that socialism could be something that could be a key to helping more people successfully live in this world. If any of those things apply to you, then you know deep down that these institutions practiced by the US are not fit for you and they are not meant for you. And so we are so happy that you are with us today. And we're going to continue to talk more about understanding how to separate what institutions these how these institutions uphold the same policies, practices, ideologies that are continuing to oppress us, right? And I think it's so important to kind of break that down and to really think about that, because I think now at this point we've had so many July 4th, our ancestor voices, broadcasts. We've had so many on Thanksgiving, our ancestor voices broadcasts, right? And we've had other broadcasts where we're highlighting, these big institutions that the US celebrates and how they have not been useful or helpful to any oppressed group of people, whether it's African descent, whether it's Asian descent, even, poor Europeans in the diaspora, or even, our Irish comrades, right? Like, this has never been a thing. We know that these institutions have not been of support to Indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. But yet the question remains, how do we continue to remind those of us that may not know that we should be resisting, we should not be supporting or accepting these institutions? Because under capitalism, and more importantly, under the capitalistic propaganda, we are reminded every single day. This is why you're still seeing commercials for furniture and cars, because it's the 4th of July sale and they're trying to get their inventory out to you. And so you have to remember, it's not enough for you yourself to understand that you should be resisting these systems, but you constantly have to be reminded of why you should be spending money because of the institution that you are very much trying to resist. I hope that you all are still with me, because it's really deep and you got to really break that down and be able to basically put a helmet on where you can just go into overdrive of resisting. But it's not enough for you to resist. You need to know why you're resisting. You need to be able to explain it to other people. You need to be able to explain it to other people on a consistent basis, which means you have to be consistent with why you're resisting. You can't not celebrate the 4th of July one year and then just decide that you're going to celebrate it the next. And we always give the example that people will say, well, what are you doing for the 4th? And it's like, nothing, it's a regular day. And so just continuing to enforce that, continuing to push that, continuing to push, right? And I think for a lot of Africans, they will say, I don't celebrate it, but yet they're barbecuing or they're doing this or they're doing that. And so, like, I think that those are ways that we can continue to hold our comrades accountable and continue to challenge that and push the needle, right? And just kind of move the needle and push the envelope a little bit, excuse me, and just kind of help people to understand. But even if you yourself are saying you don't celebrate these things, by definition, you are honoring this institution on the day that it was designed to be honored. So therefore, theoretically speaking, you are, and if physically speaking, you are, right? And so, like, helping people to still see what it means to be resistive and how much power can be found within that, how lonely it can be at first, yes, when you tell everybody you're not celebrating it and you give them your reasons. But over time, people will start to admire you, and they'll start to think more deeply about why you are taking such a principled approach, because honestly speaking, they don't have principled approaches in their life. So you're going to draw out their curiosity. I know this from personal experience. I've had countless conversations with friends about why I don't celebrate this, that, and the other. Why, when we go to sporting events, I don't stand up to honor the presentation of the flags and the guards and all that stuff. I don't even know what it's called because I don't pay attention to it. Like, that has been registered for me. It has been drilled into my brain. And I'm so humbled that my parents have enforced those kind of values for me, where now I do it as an adult. And when I go to sporting events with my friends, I explain to them ahead of time, I just want you to know, I'm not going to be doing this. And you know what I always come to find? What I always come to find is my friends will say to me, oh, well, if you're not going to stand, then I won't. Because people need to bandwagon. They don't really know how to just stand on their own 2 feet, or, be in their own space and be confident with just their own decisions. They don't know how to do that. But if they see someone else practicing the beliefs that they very much believe in, they're just not brave enough to exploitly and express it wholeheartedly, then they're going to get on your bandwagon. And that's exactly what happens every single time. So then I have friends that are like, I won't do it if you're not going to do it. And I'm like, but I'm the one who initiated the conversation. I'm the one who said at the beginning that I wasn't going to do this. So it's pretty convenient for you to say now you're not going to do it. But again, that's the propaganda, right? And then it's like, oh, what's going to happen if we don't follow the rules? But all of that is by design too. We live in a system where it's constantly enforced that we follow the rules. And if we don't follow the rules, we're a bad person. If we don't follow the rules, we're not patriotic and all this other BS. But who said we wanted to be patriotic? Who said we wanted to believe that this is a good country, that this is a good nation? Who said that we wanted to honor any of that? This is why thinking for yourself is so important. And also knowing that history or herstory or their story, for the most part, there is an objective lens to it if you choose to see it that way. And if you are willing to resist the propaganda, then you're going to be in for a treat, because all the while, you know deep down that you shouldn't be celebrating these institutions. And then you start to do more research where you are more aware of the fact that you were right. And just because you live in a world that teaches you every day that you should be doing this, you should be doing this, you should be doing this, that doesn't mean that you should. It's possible that the world we live in is not based on ethics. It's possible that the world we live in is not based on morality. So therefore, all the things they're telling you to do, you probably should not be doing them. And all the things they're telling you not to do, you probably should be doing them. And we've continued to highlight that contradiction over the time that we've been doing these seminars, and we'll continue to do that because it's causing people to reflect, and we need more reflection. We need much more reflection. So just kind of thinking more about this, the Declaration of Independence was ratified on July 4th as the day set aside to commemorate its creation. The Declaration was created by European descent, or what you might call white colonizing and slave owning men like George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, so on and so forth, right? These folks owned slaves, and they very much benefited as well as enforced colonization, right? These men were obviously racist as well as assaulting people sexually, without consent, right? And they routinely violated African descent women, African women, and there was no reparation, there was no retribution, none of that. There was no, they didn't even see our ancestors as humans, so therefore there was nothing wrong that was done. And because of that, like, people celebrated that, people celebrated the fact that they did that. They considered it to be normalized and considered it to be an everyday part of life to have those kind of violating actions and thoughts that were done to other people. And besides the point that we weren't even seen as humans, let's talk about that. So there was a lot that needed to be unpacked there. And so these thugs can never be founding anything for us, because they didn't even respect us from the moment they forced us on the ships to the moment that we were forced off the ships. It was only ever a benefit for their pocket for us to be exploited. It was only ever a benefit, only ever a benefit, only for them. That's all it ever was. So they are low life criminals and scum along with the system that they produced. And I'm so glad that we had work study yesterday before doing this presentation broadcast, because we had such an in-depth conversation yesterday where we talked in detail about some terms that are connected to this, but we actually didn't even talk about July 4th. What we talked about was living in a imperialist capitalist America and trying your best to be a principled individual. And we've continued to talk about that over the last, I'd say, 3 to 4 months in our work study. It comes up at least once throughout the meeting that we will bring it up. We even talked about, Africans who think that they've arrived. And we talked about like how we could encourage them to consider what a Pan-Africanist viewpoint would look like, especially under this Black capitalism ideology that some of our people are expressing. And it made me think about some of the conversations I've had with friends where they have said to me, quite put, well, I have a biracial background and I don't have a connection to my African side. My dad was not in my life when I was born, or my mom was not in my life when I was born, and I really don't know much about my African side. And so then I've thought to myself, okay, but that doesn't mean that it's not there, and it doesn't mean that you can't tap into it. So part of you being able to tap into it is knowing that you live in a society where you're not valued. I think that's so important, and that's very critical that we just acknowledge it and admit it. And if we acknowledge it and if we admit it, then that means we can build on it to understand that not only are we not valued and we don't matter, but the US has never ever cared about the experience or the respect of oppressed people, because it was only ever designed to exploit off of those people's backs. So this is why we continue to talk about, what it means for African people specifically to celebrate the 4th of July, when in actuality, the US, as its imperialist capitalist form that it is now, would not even exist without the exploitation of African people. Not only were we abducted and used for labor, but our materials were stolen and are being stolen. Our materials are being exploited right now and have been exploited in the past. This is exactly why African people are not respected. So to me, that is very backwards for you to ask me to celebrate the day that this country became independent, but the only reason this country has any of the success and the stature that it has is because it was stolen from any other individual group or population of people on this planet, including the very land that America is established on. That was stolen. The people who built this country and established the banking industries and the locksmith companies and the insurance industries, you stole those people too. You colonized anybody you could be able to colonize, including your own people in Ireland. You've continued to sexually assault African descent ancestors as well as indigenous descent folks. You've never valued or respected anyone. You've only seen people's land as a means to an end for you. That's why the Palestinian people are not valued and respected today. And this is also why you think Zionism is a way of life, because you don't even want to acknowledge that the level of inhumanity that America has brought on other individuals, but also on other spaces, organizations, groups of people, as well as the imperialist lens and the capitalist lens on top of that. You got to make money. And in order to make money, you got to exploit other people who are less powerful than you. That's the bottom line. So you've continued to be a bully this whole time. So everything you have is because you took it from somebody else. Why would I celebrate that? Me, a humanist, why would I celebrate that? Why would I encourage that? Why would I tell other people to celebrate that? This is why you have to know your principles, you all. This is why you have to know them. This is why you have to stand for something. Otherwise, you'll fall for anything. And so, like, we have to continue to have these conversations, because that would be like somebody who is being bullied, and then on the day that the bully has a birthday, the victim shows up with a gift and says, I really want to support you. Happy birthday. You've been in my life this whole time. I appreciate you. Like in many spaces that does happen, because victimization is a real thing. But my point I think I'm making metaphorically is, no victim in their right mind would really be able to do that unless their life was on the line at some point. Most victims understand that the person causing them harm should not be celebrated. And I think that's the problem for Black capitalists, is they don't see that they're being caused harm. Even poor Africans don't see that they are being caused harm. They think that they just have to fall in line because there's no other way. There's always another way. There is always another way. And if you don't believe me, you should increase your political education and do the research. Next slide, please, because we have too many ancestors who have found countless ways, too many for us to name, where you can still find another avenue to enforce the respect that you are not receiving. We can look at the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee and all the work that they did. We can look at the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. We can look at the work that the Pan-African Party for the Independence of Guinea-Bissau is doing right now. We can think of how they pushed out the Portuguese. That does not go without social beneficial consequences by pushing out the colonizer. That's always a great thing when that happens. We could think about the work that the Organization of African Unity is doing. I mean, there's too many to name right now, and we've already named several in the different broadcasts that we have done. Shout out to the American Indian movement. Shout out to the Brown Berets. Shout out to the Ambed King Carr Study Circle out of Oakland. this organization for people from India who are resisting the caste system, which is based on white supremacy. I mean, this is too much, right? Of familiarity for us, where this is what we do and this is what we know. So it's important to kind of think more about that, because if you really understand what we're saying, then even you have to question why you're celebrating it. And if you haven't been able to speak up and say, yeah, that really doesn't make sense, then I think that's the problem. I think that's the problem. And I think you need to admit that that's the problem. I think ultimately you need to decide, do I want to think for myself, or is it easier for me to just fall in line and do what everybody else is doing? And more importantly, what example is that setting for people who are watching you, like your children or your, excuse me, godchildren, or even your partner, right? Like the people who matter to you, I'm pretty sure they would want you to think for yourself. Maybe that's just me, but these are things that we have to think about, you all. You know, this is how we start to move into dismissing the brutal colonial history, or the herstory, or the theirstory, right? We need to understand that there was a concerted effort, but by that concerted effort, defenders of this capitalist empire had the intentions of protecting their legacy. They did that by theft of land, they did that by killing thousands of people, right? They did that by destroying entire communities, right? They are doing this by denying and dismissing criminal deeds. They're not taking responsibility for the violence that they have bestowed, for the lack of humanity and respect that they are not enforcing, right? Their most effective tool that they have used to accomplish this is gaslighting the communities that have been brutalized, making it seem like it's us, we're tripping, when that is not at all what is happening, and really pitting us against one another. That's another way that I think they've gaslit us in that way, because we are not capable enough, because we're not in control. So we're not really sure if our comrades who we've been organizing with for many, many months or many years in some cases, we're starting to question even if we can trust them, because they've gotten so good. The oppressor, I'm saying, has gotten so good at incorporating people to infiltrate, allowing people to become informants into our organization spaces, to the point where it's hard for us to know who we can trust and who we can't. That's all by design. That is all by design. And the sooner we recognize that, the better. An example they focus on today is the manifestation of their terrorism, like the conditions of the inner city communities and reservations they forced us into, as an example of the superiority of their backward system. You know, I continue to think about how they're constantly shifting the narrative so that it is promoting and supporting and centering white supremacy. That's exactly what happened with the farming industry in Azania, but they tried to make it seem like European farmers were the ones that were under attack. But the disparity of how much more valued and respected and successful European farmers are to farmers in Azania was outrageous beyond measure. It was outrageous beyond measure. But it's always going to be that white supremacy needs to be the center. It's always going to be that capitalism and imperialism needs to be the center. So these are things that we have to really think about, you all, because we're not in a position where we have time to make these kind of mistakes. We should know at this point that this needs to be evaluated. And even if you're joining us for the first time and you've never thought about these concepts in this way, you've never thought about organizing in this way, even if none of that has ever crossed your mind before, you have a responsibility to get access to information that is ethical, and that is based on truth. And you should be able to detect what information is being lied to you and what information is not. If you don't have the ability to do that, then perhaps it's time for you to find a new source of getting your information, because your current source may not be doing a good job as much as you think, if you don't even know how to be critical of information that's being given to you. There's ethics involved, there's, you know, humanitarianism, there's concepts where you should be able to see how the agenda is being force fed to you versus how the agenda doesn't need to be force fed, because it's always based on truth. And so we can continue to talk more about that, but we would encourage you all, if nothing else, this is why political education is so important, because you must be able to think for yourself. And you can't necessarily build your political education by yourself. My last example before I pass it back to Baba Ajamu, we had just finished reading Return to the Source by Amilcar Cabral, and there was one title that he said in one of his chapters, and it was my turn to do the discussion questions, and I understood it one way, But then when I asked the question to my comrades, I had three different answers of what they thought Amilcar was trying to say. And it was so insightful for me to hear from them, because this is what work study is all about. I'm thinking about this one way, and then hearing these three different perspectives gives me so much more to consider in addition to my own understanding. So it's not our fault that we're not understanding what's been written, but it is our fault if we choose not to organize with other people so that we can get other perspectives that will help us be better organized for the actual oppressor. And with that, I will pass it back to Baba Jamu.
Asante Sana, Obrigada. Thank you very much. And Shakura. And just to continue deeper, you all just continuing to drive underbelly on this thing and really like expose it for what it is. July 4th and all of these imperialist holidays, just quite frankly, they disrespect African history and culture. They disrespect indigenous people's history and culture. They disrespect even poor white working class people's culture. And we say that because if you think about it, besides the fact that they expect us to commemorate July 4th, even as Shakur laid out, the people who wrote the so-called Declaration of Independence, they were, Thomas Jefferson owned 6 dozen African people as personal property. He made his claim to fame being a leader in this country by leading assassination, genocide raids against indigenous people. This is who this man was. And you're telling us that we should look up to someone like that who sought to annihilate us. George Washington sold an African woman for a keg of molasses. This is what these people were. So to me, these are scum. These are bottom shoe scum, each and every one of them. And anybody that doesn't see that and wants us to, well, how come even Friday, like what my wife and I do, we don't want to be around. We don't want to hear the fireworks. We don't want to do any of it. Right. So we go camping because California is a state where there's fire threat. So we know that in these campgrounds, people aren't going to be able to do any fireworks. And so the last few years, I haven't heard a single firework because I've been where people couldn't do it. And that was by design. And we go to these places and, these colonized thinking people, they have, we go to RV parks. We have a motorhome. We do that. That's how we relax. And these people have on their units, they always have American flags and don't tread on me and Blue Lives Matter and all this stuff. And we proudly put up our huge Pan African flag. And I was sitting there yesterday and Friday and seeing the people. I'm on the side of the vehicle where they can't see me, but I could see them, and they're coming over and they're looking at the flag and they're trying to figure out what it is because they don't know. Because like Shakur said, people don't know anything in this society. Even a lot of our people don't even know our own flag, and so they're looking at it. They're trying to figure it out, and sometimes they'll ask me, "What is that flag?" One time, in one of the places, the white man asked me, "What does that flag mean?" And he had a "Don't tread on me" and some racist, backward racist flags on his unit. I had seen it already. And I said, it means the absolute opposite of all of your flags. And that's all I said. And I was reading the book. I went back to my book and he stood there for a moment. He didn't say anything. But I mean, I think the point is that, to expect us to honor these backward institutions it clearly demonstrates poor math skills, you all, because the Declaration of Independence, to begin with, was signed into law July 4th, 1776. The Emancipation Proclamation that ended chattel slavery in this country wasn't signed until 87 years later. So even if you start there from just that perspective, clearly the Declaration of Independence, July 4th, had nothing to do with us, right? Clearly, that's the case. And the other thing we have to talk about is this lie that's being repeated constantly that the Civil War in this country was fought to end slavery. That's a goddamn lie. That was not why the Civil War was fought. Abraham Lincoln, in his address after the South was defeated in the Civil War, you can look it up for yourself. He said that his ideal plan would have been to send all of us back to Africa. I wish to God they would have figured out a way to do it, but they couldn't do that. And so they didn't have the capacity to do that. And so his next great brain scheme was to enlist us to fight on behalf of the Northern Army, the Union Army, as they called it. And the reason why was because who had greater motivation to see the South defeated than the people who were enslaved by the Southern states? Of course, we had the greatest motivation. And I got to give the cracker credit because his strategy was effective because nobody fought harder in the Civil War than the African battalions. Nobody fought harder. Nobody fought harder than the indigenous people, the code talkers that they exploited. Nobody fought harder in all of those entities than us because we felt that it would, by doing that, it would put us in a position to gain freedom and independence. But we thought that these people had morality. So we can be excused for that. But the point about the Civil War is the Civil War was fought for one reason. It was fought because the emerging Northern capitalists who had generated capital. And you got to understand what capital is. Capital is not just having money in the bank. Capital is money that you invest to make money, that you have no intentions of spending. It's having millions of dollars that you invest to make millions and billions more. So just because you think like a capitalist, that doesn't make you a capitalist. If anything, you might be an entrepreneur, you might be someone who just tries to make a dollar out of 15 cents, but you are not a capitalist unless you own and control capital. That makes you a capitalist when you have capital. So the emerging capitalists who got their initial capital from the profits from the transatlantic slave trade, that's where that came. That's what Shakur is talking about. She talks about the banking industry, the insurance industry. You look it up. That's how those industries started, was through money that came from. That's the question you got to ask. All those 350 years that we worked for free, where did all that money go? Well, it went to developing the industrial period, as they call it, which was the emergence of capitalism. So these people emerged from that and they wanted to expand capitalism because they understood that capitalism was the best way to increase their profitability. And now you got these southern states that want to maintain slavery and base their production on human hands picking cotton. And these white folks were like, this is not going to make us the profitability. We got cotton gins. This is much more efficient production. We got to stop these people. And stopping slavery was just a byproduct of industrializing the South. That's all it was. They didn't give a damn about us. So no white man or woman or white alien or white anything freed us from slavery. We freed ourselves because the most important reason why the slavery institution had to be ended is because of the constant slave revolts. I work at a labor union. I tell them all the time the first work stoppages in this backward ass country were my ancestors resisting slavery. Those are the first examples of work stoppages. They always, oh, not prepared. I don't give a damn what they're prepared for. We're going to tell the truth about this history. And so these people had nothing to do with our freedom. C.L.R. James wrote a book. You should read it. Pan-African slave revolts, 300 slave revolts in the Western Hemisphere in a 100-year period. They couldn't sustain it, you all. So nobody freed us. And the continued propagation by liars, grifters, and opportunists, all these Negro coons on social media talking about slavery was good for us. I wish we could go to the days of Azania, South Africa, when they throw black tar on these traders and set them on fire. God damn it! I mean, this is just people who are sick of being disrespected. That's all that is when we say that. I'm not advocating you to do anything you shouldn't be thinking about doing already yourself anyway. But what we have to say is, we don't owe any respect towards anybody that doesn't respect us. That's just basic human principles. Anybody that denies our humanity, you're an absolute fool if you endorse their humanity. And any of you that claim to be Christians or whatever, and you're advancing that kind of thinking as some form of Christian doctrine, you're not practicing Christianity, you're practicing colonialism disguised as Christianity. That's all you're doing. Frantz Fanon, who the picture on the screen illustrates, who's speaking at the All African People's Conference in Accra, Ghana in December 1958. Fanon wrote several books. You got to read them. The Wretched of the Earth, Black Skin, White Mass, Towards Colonialism, a lot of books. And one of the things that Frantz Fanon, he was a psychiatrist from the Caribbean, Martinique, who ended up Pan-Africanist, obviously, ended up in Algeria helping the Algerian Revolution. And one of the things that Fanon taught us is for people who are colonized, the most significant thing you have to do is uproot the thinking and the values of the colonizer. And my question for you all is, if we're sitting here in 2025 wearing the colonizer's names, his European names, speaking his European language, because that's what I'm doing right now, and that's what you do. And you don't have any desire to learn any other language, any other African language. Spanish is a colonizer language. Don't think, well, I speak Spanish. No, that's just one colonizer over the other colonizer. You know, your language is one of the indigenous languages spoken by the indigenous people. So we're wearing the colonizer's name, speaking the colonizer's language, glorifying the colonizer's culture. Can't wait to get to Paris and Rome and all of these European. Nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying don't go to those places, but that's not the issue. The issue is you never thought, I want to go home. I want to go to Africa and see my people, my culture, my history. That's not an accident. That's by design. It's not an accident that only not even 10% of African people in the US even have passports. That's not an accident, because the slave master wants you to think, like Malcolm X said, no, leave this good white man. Are you crazy? I'm staying right here up under this white man. So we have a responsibility to destroy the myths of the colonizer. That's what we have to do. Destroy the myths. So as we go forward, a proper analysis, it's the responsibility of all peace and justice loving people to demand integrity in challenging the oppressor's version of history. For example, we have to become educated about systemic oppression against indigenous people, like the Homestead Act, which was responsible for stealing up to 40% of these lands in this country from indigenous people and making them available to European settlers. We as African people, indigenous people, Asian people were not permitted to get access to these lands, just white people. That's why they have all the land ownership. And y'all know in this country, land ownership is wealth. That's how that happened. It had nothing to do with hard work and industrial. That's bullshit. That's just what they want you to believe. They didn't get it through that. Their families got it by theft and murder. That's how they got it. So we got to understand that history. Because if we understand it, we'll stop perpetuating their version of it and we'll perpetuate our own. And we have to shut down these lies questioning slavery by saying things like, I see this on social media. That's why I call them coon. You shouldn't call. That's exactly what they are, is Negro coons. I would call them something worse if I could think of something worse to call them. But they're on social media right now saying, where are the slave ships? This is the most dumbass thing. And some of you say that. Be honest. If it was slavery, where were the slave ships? These people were the emerging capitalist class, the initial capitalist class. So they protected their assets. Don't be stupid. Understand that this is how the insurance industry proliferated. These companies you see on the screen, Aetna, AIG, New York Life, these huge insurance companies, the biggest insurance companies on the planet Earth, do you know how they started? They started by insuring the enslavers, insuring their slave ships. This is research you could do if you weren't intellectually lazy. You want to know where the slave ships are? They disintegrated. That's what ships do. Salt water is devastating. If you live in a place where there's salt water, you live in beaches, it destroys your car, your house. So damn well a ship that was operational hundreds of years ago is not going to be here today. You have to be a damn fool to think like that. But the insurance of those ships, you can research that and find all that out. I've done it myself for years and found out that that's how we were able to discover for the first time several decades ago that these insurance companies were responsible and put the pressure on them. So they've had to admit it, which they've done, that they've done it. But this doesn't need to just be a few of us that know this. You shouldn't be hearing about this today for the first time. This should be standard knowledge for our children. Because if they understand history this way, we won't be sitting here with this Negro mentality, this slave master mentality, sitting there, somebody calling you the N-word, and you're all you can do is pull out your damn phone and plead with them to stop. You better pick up a stick and knock the hell out of them, goddammit. That'll stop them from saying that to you right away. I guarantee you. I've done it. I know that it works. And that's how you get people to respect you. You don't have to hit them if you're a pacifist or whatever you are, but you can at least respond to them in a way that upholds your dignity and doesn't transfer all the power to them, because that's what we do. Well, why are you talking to me like that? Because you're a devil. That's why you're talking to me like that. Because you're a demon. You're an anti-human being, not even worthy of breathing human air. That's why you talk to them like that, God damn it. And that is the way you talk to them when you have respect for yourself. And if we have a knowledge of history, we get that. Capitalist insurance companies, we said this. It's how they all started. In the banking industry, all these banks, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, they all started from slavery. You sitting there, got $100 in these damn banks, talk, I got $100, I got a bank account. Yeah, slave, your slave master gave you a bank account. That's no monumental task. I mean, that's nothing. And it's not, I'm sorry, but uh it's nothing to say, well, we should start our own bank, because the system is still the same system. Don't y'all know that even if you have an African bank or an indigenous bank, banks make their money how? You deposit money into their, you can't fool us with this nonsense because we study. So, how do banks make their money? I know a lot of you never thought of that. Well, I don't know. Well, the way banks make their money is you deposit your money to them and they take your money and they invest it. That's why there's penalties when your money's not there, because they can't rely on your money. That prevents them from being able to invest it and make profits. That's why if you open a certificate of deposit, they take that money. That's why they do that for 7 months or a year or whatever, because they don't want to have to worry about having that money available for that period of time, and they invest it. And they give you a small percentage of the profitability that they make from that investment. So this is how this happens, right? This is how these companies make their money. So these banks invested in our ancestors and made all this money as a result of it. And so it's not, and then even today in 2025, they invest their money. So even if you invest in credit unions, which is better than banks, they still have to invest with CDs to these platforms that engage in exploitative behavior, because that's where you can make the most money. If you understand stock, then you know that stock is based on you make an investment that has the best possible return potential, and those are going to be the most exploitative ones. I mean, that's why they don't like socialism, because it really eliminates your ability to exploit people, and they don't want that. They want to be able to exploit people because that's where the profitability is. So this is how this system works, you all. That's what it's based on. It was built on that, and it's maintained on that. So you can't just say, "Well, I want to start a black bank and that solves the problem," because your bank is going to have to invest in the same uh, sources that Chase, Wells Fargo, and B of A invest in if they want to maintain pace. That's just a fact of life. That's why we're anti-capitalist. It's not that we understand our people trying to find a way to exist in this system, but what we're saying is that the wealth of this system results from exploiting our people, exploiting our resources. So even if every African in the US, all 50 million of us, got $1 million tomorrow, the only way that could happen is because of the exploitation of Africa, and we don't want that. That's not progress to us. It's progress to you if you have a very limited micro-nationalist perspective and you're only concerned about yourself and your family because you're closing yourself off from the world. But we're not small-minded like that. We have a much broader consciousness, and we know that there are enough resources to provide for everybody. So we don't have to knock down people that look like us and other colonized and exploited people to have resources. And we don't want a system that does that. That's why we're socialists. We know people don't understand all that because you don't study it. All you know about socialism is what they told you on NBC and CIA network. You never read one single book about socialism, and you know goddamn well you haven't read one book about socialism. So you can't talk to us about, like, don't waste our time. But we're trying to tell you that there's a scam going on, and guess who the target of the scam is? So best practices 100% of the time interrupt this backward institutionalization. I mean, if someone said, like, when people say to me, have a good fourth or how's your fourth, I don't even answer them. Like, when I go to work tomorrow, some people probably, well, how was your fourth? I don't even answer them. I change the subject. You don't have to confront people. I'm not saying you have to confront everybody, but you don't have to participate. Well, I had a great fourth. It was great. Even if you tell yourself, well, I don't celebrate it, if you allow that to happen, you are celebrating. You're perpetuating it. How was your fourth? Oh, it was fine. You're perpetuating it, regardless of what you did or didn't do. You're perpetuating it. So we got to halt that. We got to stop it. I don't say anything. I'm not prepared. And sometimes people ask, like, man, yesterday, how was your fourth? I didn't say anything. I'm walking my dog. How was your fourth? I'm like, it was just like the fourth of every other month. And I just kept going. Like, figure out what works for you. I know most of you not going to be confrontational like I am, because I'm not afraid of these people like a lot of you all are. And that's okay. You can find whatever way works for you, but you got to find some way to halt it, because if you don't, you're allowing it to seep into your subconsciousness. And if you do that, then you're a part of the problem, right? So don't do that. Protect yourself. And know the history, because if you know the history, people won't bother you. People try to start a conversation, like the white man the other day was telling me about, 600,000 white soldiers died in the Civil War. And I'm like, yeah, I know that. They didn't die for us. It had nothing to do with us. That was white on white crime. That's what that was. White on white crime. I'm like, yeah, that's exactly what I said. Every war they did it during that period. World War I, World War II, white on white crime. It had nothing to do with us. None of it. Didn't benefit us in every way. And I explained to him what I explained to you about why the Civil War was fought. And then he tried to talk about the Second Amendment. And why did he do that? I broke his ass down on that one too. That was only created to arm the militias, who every white man was obligated by law to belong to in the southern slave states. So the Second Amendment was just designed to make sure they were armed. That was it. I said, y'all don't believe in no gun rights. I said, because as soon as the Black Panther Party started doing gun patrols against your racist Gestapo police, Ronald Reagan and the National Rifle Association, NRA, they opposed, they supported gun control here in California in 1967. Don Muford, racist politician from Marin County down the road here, passed the bill. They passed it unanimously. Gun control. That's why today California has the strictest gun control laws in the country. That's because African people got the goddamn nerve to start carrying guns. So don't talk to us about no gun. That's a bunch of bullshit, like everything else they do. It's a bunch of bullshit. But if you know the history, like we do, you can break them down quick. He's like, I don't know what to say. I'm like, I do. Go read some books. Stop talking and start studying. That's what the last thing needs to be said in this conversation. Because if we were in a boxing ring, you just got your ass kicked. So that's where we need to be. And we need a lot more people out here writing. Do some writing. I write all the time. Most of us don't write anything. Write history from the viewpoint of the colonized, not the colonizer. We need that perspective out there. And of course, we need a lot more people in organizations with strong political education programs, because that's the only way we can make correct education mass, is if we have people who are engaging in constant political education, right? And yeah, I got the picture of the burning flag because that's all it's good for. If you understand history, what good, like Kwame Ture said, it's toilet paper. And I don't even think that that's correct, because that flag is not good enough to wipe this pristine behind that I have attached to me. I wouldn't touch my behind with that disgraceful piece of filth and that Constitution. None of that filth would touch my body, and it's not good enough to touch yours. And we should begin to talk about it like that. God damn it, we should tell the truth. This is not us. Why are you scared to talk about it? What kind of person says that they're a person of morality and is scared to speak truth? You know our ancestors had to deal with when they spoke truth. Our people colonized at home in Africa, the Middle Passage, the slave plantations. So many of us stood up and spoke truth. Now cowardice is normalized. I don't have a damn. I don't have an inch. I have more respect for gas that I pass than those of you that try to justify this cowardice. And that's just a fact. We need to start calling this what it is. It's an empire. And as my big brother, Sizwe Mtafutu Kweli used to say all the time, I can tell you American history in 10 seconds because I'm not lying. I'm telling the truth. Some crooks from Europe kidnapped Africans, came to America, annihilated the indigenous people, and built an empire. That is it. That's the history of this empire. All this other stuff is out here to confuse us, and we refuse to be confused. We thank you for joining us today. We want to invite you back next week. We have a very special program. They're all special, but this one is certainly very important to me, and I want to definitely ask you to come. Respect for a fallen comrade, revolutionary Pan-Africanist, our just departed brother Sekou Mbaki in Senegal made his physical transition. I had the opportunity to go to Senegal multiple times, and in Senegal and Gambia do organizing work for the All African People's Revolutionary Party with my big brother Sekou Mbaki, and we want to have a whole show to honor his contributions. Genuine revolutionaries fly below the radar, y'all. You don't know anything about them, but this is a brother that you should know about. So please join us next week while we talk about him, and we ask you to participate in the scanning the red and white blue QR code at the top left. It has all of our AAPRP programs besides this one, including this one, but besides this one as well. Our Forward Ever shop, you should go there and buy clothes that support our revolutionary work. Please do that. Hood Communist is a revolutionary African blog. It's good political education so that you can get educated and not be, relying on imperialism to tell you what's going on in the world. Join the All African People's Revolutionary Party. Go to www.aprp-intl.org. You can watch a video. You can get information about how to do that. We encourage you to do that. And the bottom right QR code, black and white, Burkina Books, our APRP work on the ground in Burkina Faso and now Niger, and eventually Mali as well, and the Sahel. Help us become a monthly sponsor to that work. And the flyer is not up here, but those of you in Sacramento, we're organizing Pan-African Women's Day on Monday, July 21st. So we want to invite you to come out. We'll have a panel discussion of women about the state of the world as it relates to women and what we can do to change it. And the last thing on the top right, I have my book, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence. It's an 80-page manifesto about how to organize in communities. It's only available on Amazon. They have the printing press. I don't. So please just spend the little $8 to get it, because I use 100% of the proceeds to finance our work, specifically the anti-fascist work that I'm heavily involved in. So we appreciate you joining us today. We ask you to continue to engage these questions, you all. Join us next week to commemorate fallen brother Sekou Mbaki in Senegal, and also give yourself rather the opportunity to think about the things that we've talked about. How do we shut down these backward institutions? Because this is how we won't ever get free until we have freedom fighters, and we won't have freedom fighters unless we create freedom fighters. The only way freedom fighters are created is through political consciousness. So these tactics we're endorsing are ways to increase our political consciousness. And the best way we can do that is by spreading it as wide and as far as we possibly can. So please consider that. You can't do it alone. You can't do it with just 2 or 3 people. You've got to be engaged in a process to build capacity. That's why, you know, the APRP is not perfect, but it's the only organization I see that has Africans all over the world on the same mission. And that's what we need. If you have something better, please let me know. All right, because that's what we need. So I'm going to continue to do this. Forward ever, backwards never. Enjoy the rest of your evening.